Today, we investigate the truth behind the tragic fate of the Barron family, a case that has captivated and confounded the public and authorities alike. This is a story of loss, suspicion, and ultimately a search for truth. Welcome to another exciting episode of Grim Riddle's True Crime Stories. From day one, there was something suspicious about the death of Irene Barron, whose body was found in a bedroom of her Florin, California home in June 1992. But lacking evidence, no suspect was arrested until more than 3 years later, after Barron's 2 young children and her mother-in-law had also died, one by one, under similar circumstances. The suspect was suspected of having Munchausen by proxy, making him the first male to be suspected of this disorder. Munchausen by proxy, or MBP, also known as factitious disorder imposed on another, is a psychological disorder wherein a caregiver deliberately fabricates, exaggerates, or induces health problems in those under their care, typically a child. The primary motive is to gain attention, sympathy, or reassurance stemming from the dependent's medical issues. This can lead to unnecessary medical interventions and can be extremely harmful to the person being cared for. MBP is considered a form of abuse and is a serious mental health condition that requires urgent treatment. Not much can be found on the early life of Jack Barron, the subject of this story. Most reports focus on the deaths in the case. Apparently, his father, Elmore Barron, only 22, doubted his infertility and suspected infidelity in his marriage to 19-year-old Roberta, a devout Catholic who had saved herself from marriage. Elmore worked for the railways and was away from home for long periods at a time, and this caused a lot of tension at home. Jack Barron was born on October 21, 1961, in Castro Valley, California. At an early age, Jack developed a passion for model trains, following in his father's footsteps. This hobby became a lifelong connection to his distant father. As Jack grew, so did the complexities in his relationship with his father Elmore, marked by unspoken emotions and unresolved tensions. The strain in his parents' marriage was evident. Roberta doted on Jack, perhaps to make up for his father's absence. The marriage eventually reached a breaking point when Roberta accused Elmore of infidelity. Elmore left the family when Jack was around 12 or 13, which seemed to have a lasting effect on him. Roberta, now a single parent, moved back to the San Francisco Bay Area. She worked hard at Safeway to make ends meet. After high school, Jack Barron chased his childhood dream and began working for the railroad. This job, with its familiar railway tracks and the comforting sounds of trains, provided him with a sense of connection and comfort. But at 25, he had a work injury that led to a period of disability leave. It was during this difficult time that Jack found himself in Chester, California, visiting a close family friend. Irene's background was very different from Jack's. She was born in Reno, Nevada, to father Jack and mother Norma in July 1957. Her dad worked as a radar specialist in the Air Force. Irene was the 4th and youngest child of the large and loving Paget family. Irene had 2 older brothers and a sister. Because of her father's work in the Air Force, the family moved all over the world. Growing up, the siblings relied on each other as they barely had time to make friends at a new school before the family moved yet again. Irene was a mild-mannered and sweet person who only saw the good in other people. When her father retired from the Air Force, the family eventually settled in Fallbrook, California. Irene was a teenager at the time and enjoyed the pace of the small town, unlike other kids her age who preferred the hustle and bustle of nearby San Diego or Los Angeles. She wasn't interested in academics and preferred spending her time with animals on her family's extensive property. If she could be outdoors, she was happy. Irene was more than just a free and caring spirit. She was also beautiful. In 1974, during her junior year, she won the title of Miss Fallbrook. Irene loved this because it made many young men notice her. She welcomed the attention because what she really wanted for her future was to be a wife and a mother. A year after graduating, she married a high school sweetheart, Keith, but the marriage didn't last. Keith felt he was too young for the commitment of marriage and left her. This was a devastating blow for Irene, who valued a nuclear family above everything else. She took a lot of guilt on herself because the marriage failed. She struggled to get over it and realized that she needed a change in her life. So, in 1986, she decided to make a fresh start in Sacramento. In Chester, California, the lives of Jack and Irene intersected, each carrying the scars of their past, yet hopeful for a brighter future. Their romance quickly flourished, and Jack moved into Irene's home, which she shared with her best friend Denise. The house, spacious with 3 bedrooms, even had a room dedicated to Jack's beloved model trains. However, Denise felt uneasy about Jack. She perceived him as possibly too immature for Irene and hesitant to embrace the responsibilities of marriage and parenthood. Jack, despite his evident affection for Irene, occasionally behaved childishly, seeking attention and throwing tantrums. Irene, nevertheless, was captivated by Jack's charm. They shared dreams of family and a life together, and Jack's love boosted her confidence. Their dream soon became reality, and by spring 1988, Irene was pregnant. Their first son, Jeremy John Barron, was born on January 8, 1989. With Roberta's help, they bought a home in Sacramento, seemingly stepping into the idyllic life that Irene envisioned. After Jeremy's birth, Jack started to change, and tensions started showing. He checked Irene's every action and choice of clothing, particularly at home. He was obsessed with cleanliness and keeping up appearances. He wanted everything to be perfect. He got angry at any deviation from his standards, and this left Irene walking on eggshells. He treated Irene, their home, and their child as mere extensions of his own wishes. Denise got increasingly worried as Jack's control over their lives intensified. Denise was a friend of Irene's whom they lived with before moving to their own home. She recalled surreal moments like watching Irene vacuum when he for Jack to obsessively follow, smoothing out any vacuum tracks for a flawless floor appearance. Irene dismissed any concerns Denise had. She said Jack's behaviour was due to his upbringing and downplayed it as a harmless quirk. Despite Denise's unease about Jack's volatile temper and moodiness, Irene maintained an outwardly happy facade. The birth of their second child, a daughter named Ashley, seemed to bring Irene joy, overshadowing the problems in her marriage. Financial strains increased, with Jack working night shifts at a grocery store and Irene running a small daycare from home. On Monday, June the 8th, 1992, Christina Hamilton, a neighbour, arrived around 7 a.m. to drop off her child at Irene's daycare, which operated from their home. There was no answer. This was very unusual. After knocking for a while, she asked another neighbour to babysit. She needed to get to work. She tried numerous times to call Irene, but there was no answer. She couldn't shake off her concern for Irene, who was always home at this hour. Perhaps she was ill or hurt. She decided to check on Irene, but the front door and sliding glass door was locked. She walked around the house looking for a way in. Then she saw some movement. It was 3-year-old Jeremy. She managed to coax him to unlock a sliding door, telling him how to do it. Jeremy said, "I can't wake my mommy up." Christina went to Irene's bedroom to find her lying on the bed in her nightclothes, with a pillow over her head. Removing the pillow, Christina was shocked to see Irene, with traces of blood and makeup from the previous night on her face. She was clearly dead. Christina moved the children away and called 911. On that morning in June of 1992, the first responders to arrive on South Breeze Drive were paramedics from the Florin Fire Department. The firemen were admitted to the house by Christina, who showed them Irene's body in the back bedroom. The emergency medical personnel quickly concluded that there was nothing they could do for Irene. As Christina had realised, Irene was beyond any medical help. The 2 patrol officers that initially arrived couldn't find any apparent sign of foul play. And the sudden death of an apparently healthy 34-year-old woman was nonetheless an unusual event. The patrol officers decided to activate the next level of death response. They called the Sheriff's Department's homicide detectives, just to be sure. Sheriff's detectives Rick Lauter and Rob Riesdorf soon arrived to be briefed by the patrol officers to EMTs and Christina. The detectives walked through the house and found nothing to indicate that anyone had broken in. Questioning Christina, they learned that all the doors had been locked and that she had only gotten inside up to Jeremy removed the dowel from the sliding door track. By this point, Salisbury's Drive was crowded with emergency vehicles, the Yankee van, the sheriff's patrol cars, the detective's car, and an ambulance. Thus it was at about 9:30 a.m. that Jack Barron drove down his street towards his house, only to see a hum of ominous activity in front of him. Jack seemed staggered by this news, so much so that Lauser had to keep him from collapsing in the street. Jack said he didn't understand and asked Lauser how Irene had died. Lauser said it wasn't clear yet, but that it appeared to be from natural causes. Jack told the police that he had been at work since 11 p.m. the previous night, stating that Irene was alive when he left. He said that he hadn't returned home since then. His alibi was confirmed, and records showed he had even taken a co-worker to the hospital during his shift. Jack mentioned that Irene had been suffering from a severe cold, cough, and chronic headaches, but he was at a loss to explain her sudden death. A friend of Irene's told police that in the week leading up to her death, Irene was complaining of severe headaches. In fact, it was so bad her speech was slurred. The on-duty forensic pathologist, Dr. Gregory Schmunk, and coroner's investigator Bob Bryan both attended the call. Dr. Schmunk's examination of Irene Barron revealed significant details about her condition at the time of her discovery and death. He noted the rigidity of her extremities and jaw and fixed lividity, indicating she had been dead for several hours. Irene's body was cold, except for a slightly warmer midsection. Evidence was preserved by placing plastic bags around her hands. Blood was found on one of the pillows, and another pillow thought to have been over Irene's face had black streaks, possibly from makeup. Schmunk observed broken blood vessels in her eyes and a bruise on her calf. Temperature measurements suggested Irene might have died around 7:30 p.m. the previous night. However, determining the exact time of death was challenging. The condition of her body, found with slippers on and makeup still applied, led to the conclusion that she died before going to bed. The presence of the pillow over her face did not conclusively indicate foul play, as it might have been used to block out light due to a headache. Despite a thorough autopsy, the coroner couldn't find a definitive cause for Irene's death. One theory was that Irene had a bad headache and went to lie down before she was ready for bed. She put the pillow over her own head for comfort and then passed away. This did not seem likely. There was hemorrhaging in her eyes, supporting another theory, that she was suffocated. But this could not be definitively ruled as a cause of death, because similar hemorrhaging can occur when someone suffers a heart attack. There were no apparent red flags, and Jack wasn't a suspect. The coroner left the cause of death as undetermined, so there was no follow-up investigation. At the funeral, Jack appeared grief-stricken, and after the ceremony, he planted a tree in her honor. After Irene's death, Jack, now a single father to 2 young children, received lots of sympathy and support from friends and neighbors. They were checking on him and bringing him cooked food and babysitting for him. Irene's brother John paid Jack $100 a month to help out in case the kids needed anything. But when John did Jack's tax returns, he realized that it was actually very well off financially, yet he never hesitated to accept anyone's offer to help. Jack received $15,000 in death benefits after Irene passed away, as well as income from Social Security. There was also regular money from his job as a shelf stacker. John stopped sending him money and was surprised when Jack actually called him to say his check didn't arrive. About a month after Irene's death, friends and family were shocked when a co-worker, Starla Hayes, and her 2 children, aged 6 and 8, moved in with Jack. He said she had nowhere to stay. They were both single parents and both worked odd hours. They did have an affair though, as was later determined. Starla's presence as Jack's live-in partner raised eyebrows, especially as she was the same co-worker that he had taken to the hospital on the night of Irene's death. There were soon tensions between Jack and Starla's children. Starla noticed that Jack treated his children differently to hers. He was so strict with his children, but not hers. She worried about his parenting skills. She remembered one particularly upsetting incident when Jeremy was crying for his mum, and instead of comforting him, Jack lost it and said, "If you don't shut up, I'll send you to where mummy is." As tensions escalated, Starla left Jack soon after moving in. This also highlighted the troubling behaviour of Jack with his children and raised questions about Jack's character and his role in the events following Irene's death. Jack hired a babysitter, Jennifer Walker, to look after the children while he was at work. Things seemed to get back to normal, but tragedy struck again. 4-year-old Jeremy died in his sleep 8 months after his mother's death. Again, a cause of death could not be found. Jack said he had been struggling with a severe cold and he had given him some cough syrup. Jeremy's autopsy revealed a red mark on his face, as well as multiple hemorrhages. Other than that, he had no further injuries. It took the coroner more than 6 months to make a ruling. Jeremy's cause of death was declared to be undetermined. As his mother's death was still in the street, the coroner asked that tests be done on all the medications at their home. Extensive tests were carried out on all the medication in the household, but the tests came back clean. Genetic tests were done from Irene's family to determine any genetic cause. Again, friends of family rallied around him and tried to help him as best they could. But Irene's friend Denise was beginning to wonder if he had anything to do with his death. Her brother, John Paget, noticed Jack's odd behaviour at the funeral. He said he didn't seem to have a grasp on the trauma that the rest of us of the family was experiencing. He was, at times, almost euphoric with the attention he was getting with all the guests. Jack again received an insurance payout for Jeremy. Jack listened to music as a way to ease his grief. He loved the singer Wynonna Judd. Wynonna, known for her heartfelt music and compassionate nature, became inadvertently embroiled in a situation far darker than she could have imagined. In 1993, one of Jack's acquaintances was also the president of her fan club. He told Wynonna that Jack, who was one of her biggest fans, had lost his wife and child within a year. She kindly met with Jack to offer her condolences and arranged for him to see her show. After the show, she also gave him 2 tickets for another show with backstage passes, so he could bring Ashley along. This act of generosity was a standard gesture from a celebrity to a fan, especially one who seemed to be going through such a difficult time. He, however, started to tell friends he was seeing Wynonna and he was considering proposing. Of course, no one believed him. They didn't say anything, though, as they thought he was grieving and just needed some attention. After the tragic deaths of Irene and Jeremy Barron, Irene's family pushed for a thorough medical checkup for Ashley, the 2-year-old daughter of Jack Barron. The paediatrician, considering a potential link to sleep apnea in the family's health issues, fitted Ashley with a heart monitor. Despite the seriousness of the situation, Jack didn't make sure Ashley wore the monitor regularly, saying he was too busy. Meanwhile, Irene's family kept a close watch on Ashley for any signs of the disorder or other health concerns, especially given the recent losses in the family. Jack hired a new babysitter, Jill Presley, to look after Ashley when he was at work. Jill was a qualified nurse, and Irene's family felt that Ashley was in good hands. When Jill met Jack, he instructed her to stay awake throughout the night and watch Ashley while she slept, as she had heart problems. Then came Sunday, August 7th, 1994, and the temperature reached the high 90s. In an unusual gesture, Barron made the babysitter iced tea, just the way she liked it. Then he told her to leave the back door open, something he had never done before. That night, the babysitter fell asleep, and about the time he arrived back at work, the babysitter awoke, checked on Ashley, and found her dead. At the time, the sitter noted nothing unusual in Barron's behaviour and didn't tell detectives about the tea and open door until months later. There is no way to prove now whether the drink was spiked, but it's believed that Barron returned to the house, entered through the open door, and smothered his daughter. Once again, the coroner could not determine the cause of death, but this time with 3 unexplained deaths in the family, the autopsy report declared undetermined, homicidal violence cannot be excluded. Everyone rallied around Jack once again, arriving at his home to comfort him. He had told them that Irene, Jeremy and Ashley all had this rare genetic disease that had caused the deaths. At Ashley's funeral, Jack received flowers and a card from Wynonna Judd. He was also wearing his fan t-shirt with the words "Wise Guys," as in short for Wynonna's Guys, to the funeral. The family found it in bad taste that even though it was his daughter's funeral, all Jack could talk about was Wynonna and how nice it was of her to have sent the flowers. Following Ashley's death, Jack's reaction was notably different from his previous losses. He planted a tree and collected life insurance, but his demeanour was described as emotionless. As with Jeremy's funeral, at Ashley's funeral reception he appeared almost jovial, contrasting sharply with a sombre occasion. The coroner's declaration that Ashley's death was undetermined, with a note that homicidal violence couldn't be ruled out, intensified these suspicions. The police, responding to the increased suspiciousness and unusual circumstances, decided to exhume the bodies of Jeremy and Irene for further examination. With suspicion among his former in-laws mounting, and sheriff's detectives preparing to exhume the bodies for further tests, Barron moved in with his mother in Benicia. Detectives say Roberta Butter did not believe the family rumblings that her boy was a murderer. I think she believed he was innocent right up until the time she was about to die, Cranford said. Investigators said Barron was verbally abusive to his mother and that by February the 27th, she had decided to evict him. That day, Barron called paramedics and said he had come home to find his mother not breathing. Her room appeared normal, with papers stacked neatly around on the bed. But this time the autopsy found signs of a struggle and a violent death. Even then, it took months to develop the case. Witnesses such as Ashley's babysitter were interviewed in death for the first time. And this is where she told him about the iced tea he had made her, the first time ever he had done it. On this night, Barron was missing from his job for 4 hours, from midnight to 4 a.m., detectives say. Eileen Barron's autopsy report was sent for review to a new pathologist who found sufficient signs of suffocation to rule the death a homicide. For the first time, Barron was interviewed at length by detectives, but during 6 hours of questioning, without asking for an attorney, he maintained his innocence and repeatedly turned the conversation back to his suffering, Cranford recalled. He appears to me to be a very selfish, self-centered, cold person, Detective Cranford said. Every conversation he always turned around to me, me, me. Now, some family members are bitterly suggesting that the case may have been mishandled from the outset, and that if Irene Barron's death had been recognised as murder earlier, the 3 subsequent killings could have been prevented. It was bad enough when we thought it was natural causes that were unexplained, said John Badgett, Irene's father. Now when we realise it was homicides, it is devastating. We feel a little bit ashamed when we didn't have earlier suspicions. But Sacramento officials say proving death by suffocation can be difficult. Despite their own suspicions, beginning with the first death, there was not enough cause for arresting Barron earlier, they said. He fooled everybody, said Sheriff Ghem Craig. This would not be the first case our people were convinced was murder, but did not have enough evidence. This guy obviously is a very cool customer. Bob Bowers, the deputy coroner, said it is easy in hindsight to see what might have been done differently, but pathologists have to base their findings on the medical evidence available at the time. We would all like to have some magic eye into the future that would have been able to prevent anything from happening after the first death, he said. Without a coroner's finding homicide, detectives said they were limited in what they could do. Bringing charges when the cause of death is undetermined can backfire and result in an acquittal. I really, truly do not believe that any agency did anything wrong, Cranford said. It was nobody's fault except Jack Barron's. During questioning, Jack maintained his innocence, but the pattern of deaths and the recent findings pointed increasingly towards his involvement. To Sacramento County Sheriff's detectives, Barron is a calculating, cold-blooded killer who suffocated his wife to avoid the hassle of divorce, who killed his children when they became too big a burden, and who murdered his mother when she wanted him to move out of the home they shared. In what was to become an eerie pattern, his wife and 2 children all died on a Sunday, the 7th of the month. Cranford contains it is more than a coincidence that Barron's father was born on a Sunday, the 7th of August. It also suggests considerable premeditation, she said, since the 7th of a month that falls on a Sunday is rare. All of this information was presented in the trial, with witnesses including the babysitters, pathologists, coroners, detectives, and Irene's family and friends. Also presented was the possible motives. Investigators said Barron was indeed involved with another woman who moved in with Barron after his wife died, but left about a week before Jeremy's death. In a letter to her husband, Irene Barron wrote, "I'm really sorry you're unhappy right now. I have a hard time believing the only reason for this is my inability to keep the house exactly the way you like it. We usually have so much fun together. We have so much to be happy and thankful for. It really upsets me when I hear you talk about divorce. Things have been so good for us for so long. We don't just wake up one day and suddenly decide something like that. All my love, Irene." The police also had a statement from one of Jack's close friends. He said that Jack told him he would never go through with the divorce. He would do away with her first, which supports the idea that he had planned on killing Irene to get out of the marriage. On March the 18th, 2000, a Sacramento judge convicted Jack Barron's the first-degree murders of 3 relatives who were found dead in their beds during a 32-month period. Barron was acquitted of murdering his daughter Ashley IV, whose 1994 death remains mired in controversy. Relatives of the victims sobbed as Superior Court Judge Michael T. Garcia read the verdict after 2 days of deliberation. A defiant Jack Barron was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms in prison in the murder series that began in 1992. Claiming he was convicted on fantasy evidence, Barron blasted Sacramento Superior Court Judge Michael T. Garcia for ignoring defense arguments that his loved ones died of natural causes. "I have committed no crimes," Barron, 38, told the judge. To this day, Jack Barron maintains he committed no crimes. He claims that Irene, Jeremy and Ashley or died because of a heart condition. As for Roberta, he simply claims that there was not enough evidence to have convicted him. Through the years, he has tried to change his sentence, insisting that he is innocent. Still, authorities refuse to buy into his soft-mythization and believe he is where you should be, behind bars, paying for the fact that he killed his whole family. And there you have it, Grim Riddlers. If you have enjoyed this episode, please like and share. We would love to hear your comments. We post videos every second week for now, so if you would like to hear more, please consider subscribing. This will help our channel grow. Stay safe and see you next time.